Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Portugal pre-trip webinar. So I'm just going to get my colleagues on here, and we're going to get the webinar up and we're going to get started. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Good morning, Barb.
Morning.
We seem to be in business this morning. Good morning, Michelle. Good afternoon.
Good morning. Hey.
Okay. Alrighty. So we're going to get started in just under 2 minutes time. Delighted to be presenting you our pre-trip webinar. So this is the opportunity for us to give you a bit of in anticipation of your program. Michelle, perhaps we'll go on a bit of
Sorry, God, I didn't catch that.
On mute. There's a bit of background noise on your side, I think. Yeah, that's great. And then when we need you, then we will. There we go. And Valerie's here as well. So yeah, welcome everyone. Delighted to be, yeah, as I say, talking about everything you need to get ready for this amazing trip through Portugal. And we're going to start in just under a minute's time. So welcome all those of you who are used to introducing yourselves on Zoom. Ingrid up in Prince Edward County, Janice and Byron from Toronto, Barry and Terry from Calgary, Brian and Brenda from LaSalle, Martina from Halifax. So exciting, people coming from all over Canada. Good. We've got Valerie, our other host, here as well. So I'll be able to introduce all of your wonderful hosts for this trip. Good morning, Trish out in Smithers, British Columbia, and everyone else who's going to be joining the trip. It is 11 o'clock, so we are going to get started. Thank you again for joining us this morning. As I say, this is our pre-trip webinar where we will be, I'm going to be introducing your hosts. Valerie, you could put your video on if that's possible. There it is. Yay. Yeah, so obviously this trip is in 3 parts. So for those of you who are booked on only 1 or 2 parts, just bear with us because we're going to be covering briefly all of the parts of the itinerary. This isn't going to take long. It's only going to be about a half an hour. And the beginning part will apply to all 3 segments of our trip through Portugal. And then we'll talk a little bit about each one, the Azores, then of course, Porto and the Douro Valley, and finally the Algarve, which is the last part of our itinerary. First of all, though, I want to introduce our hosts for this program. Very exciting. First of all, depending on what order good morning, Barb, as well, is not a host of the program. Many of you have spoken to Barb, obviously one of our trip specialists who may have assisted you to get set up for the program. Good morning.
Good morning.
And then at, I think the bottom video screen, depending on what order everybody shows up in, is Valerie from Toronto. Valerie, good morning to you. Valerie is hosting the first 2 segments, so the Azores and Porto. And last but not least, in the middle window, I guess, is Michelle. Good afternoon, Michelle. Where are you, Michelle? In Vienna?
Good afternoon, good morning.
You're in Vienna at the moment?
Yes, Vienna at the moment. Exactly, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So everybody's going to sort of say their little piece. What we're going to talk about today, first of all, a bit of pre-trip preparation. So some things that you might think about, you might need to know, some tips in getting ready for your trip to Portugal. I'm going to touch on flying over, arriving in Portugal, what's going to happen also between each of these segments. I'll just touch on the itinerary. I'm not going to go through it in great detail. I'm sure you've all been studying the program and what you are, what you can expect to see during your stay in Portugal, and then finally any departure information. So let's launch right into it. As I say, in the interest of everyone's time, we'll try and keep this to less than 30 minutes. First of all, passport documents, what you need to get over there. Well, you've already all provided us your passport information, and we probably would have caught it had you not were it expiring. But it's always good double check, because I know some of our members are traveling for the first time since the pandemic, and so if you I can't tell you how often it actually happens to me where you get a panic email sort of the day before the trip saying, I don't know where I put my passport. So wherever it is that you normally keep it, don't change the location. Rather leave it where it is, that you know where it is, but just make sure that it's there, make sure it's up to date. And that's about all that you need to go there. Obviously, a copy of your e-ticket for the airport, which if you bought your tickets from us, you'll obviously have been sent a copy of. You don't need to print that stuff out. I know a lot of people come armed with all kinds of paper. Actually, in this day and age, all you really need is the record locator number and your passport, and that is sufficient to check in. And of course, many of you will check in online before departure, which you can do with SATA. The Azores Airlines, that takes you, for those of you going to the Azores on the first segment, and then if you're going to Porto or to the Algarve, you may be flying on any other combination of airlines, but that generally applies. But that's basically all you need in terms of documents. Obviously, with where we are in the pandemic or non-pandemic, we don't even want to use the word anymore, but there are no specific vaccination requirements or anything like that. So you're pretty good on that front. However, I do suggest you bring a copy of your vaccination certificate, because they may ask for it. They may not, they probably won't, but you just never know. So that's one thing, that if I was going to bring something printed out, and I still do, and I carry nothing personally printed out, but the vaccination certificate I have, just because you never know who might ask for it somewhere. That's about it. Perfect. Now, with the assistance of Michelle and Valerie, let's talk a little bit about what to pack. Now, this is obviously going to be a bit different depending on what aspect of the trip that you are going on. Because obviously the climate, the weather at the end of April in the Azores is different than the middle of May in the Algarve. So let's talk first of all about the Azores, because it is its own climactic zone, if you will, in the middle of the Atlantic. And so Valerie's going to touch on a couple points there specific to the Azores. First of all, I just want to say a couple of general rules that we say. Pack as light as you can. In fact, what we find more and more of our members are packing even for multiple weeks away with just a carry-on. And I know for a lot of people that requires quite a bit of sort of rethinking of things and how you work and what you actually need. But honestly, this isn't a fashion trip. Nobody cares if they see you in the same shirt, 6 times over the course of a month. You don't need an outfit for every day, because we're all traveling with one another. We're like family. We're like friends. We don't really care. So my rule of thumb is, a few pieces of, shirts and pants, trousers, or skirts, obviously for women. And you don't need tons of stuff. So if you can squeeze it in a carry-on, you'll be thankful, particularly if your luggage gets lost. And I hate to say it, it does still happen. It happens more than it did before the pandemic. Valerie, specific for the Azores, what other advice would you have in general for people?
Yeah, I was just going to add something to the carry-on. For those that you haven't traveled since the pandemic, carry-on used to be able to kind of get away with a little bit bigger than the fitting it into the bin, and they are clamping down heavily now. So, I've used the same carry-on for years traveling business. I usually only do carry-on, and Air Canada, I know we're not traveling Air Canada, but they are really clamping down. So just be mindful, go on and look at the restrictions for the airlines that we're going to be traveling on. So I would just say that, I would add that in for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of AirTags. So I throw them in my bags. So I think if you have an Apple phone, an AirTag is a great addition to your bag for sure.
Members talk about it all the time traveling around. If you don't know what an AirTag is, it's a little thing for, again, it's for iPhone users. For Android, they probably have something similar. I used to have something called
This is it. It's just little, the
yeah.
tile probably.
I had the tile.
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of those ones you have to have somebody that has the same app, so the odds are pretty small. But AirTags, I mean, there's somebody everywhere. I mean, every other person has an iPhone. So consider them, because it gives people peace of mind to know where your luggage is, to be able to see it on your phone when it's being, you know, loaded on the aircraft or not. Of course, you know, if it's for some reason left behind, it's better to know what airport it is by virtue of your own AirTag. So that's a great tip.
Yeah, that's just one little one. I love my AirTag, so I have it on my keys too. Well,
Yeah.
I lose those.
In terms of, you know, as we know, the weather in the Azores is very changeable. So you can get, it's the climate is temperate, and it's sort of mid-Atlantic. At this time of the year, it could be 22 degrees, it could be 12. It could be sort of anything in between. But the weather in the Azores, as the locals will tell you right off the bat, if the weather's crap, just wait 30 minutes, because it blows through, it changes very rapidly. But what does that mean in terms of what to pack, particularly for the Azores, Valerie?
Well, it's like Calgary in June, right? Without the snow. I can say that I live there. So yeah, so just recommend for sure. Rain can affect us. So cool, windy, think layers, definitely. There's no need for thick, heavy sweaters. Just pack layers, keep it light, keep it casual. Flats, definitely. And you know, just when you're thinking about your flats, think of like slippery stones also if it's raining. So making sure they've got a good grip. Definitely you'll want to pack a small umbrella. If you have one that has wind, good in the wind, that's even better. For sure, I think Ziploc bags are a great thing to add. You know, if you do get wet, then you can just quickly store that stuff. So it can be very, I mean, like any island, you never know what will happen. I was in Hawaii when the tsunami hit Japan. So things change and weather changes quickly. So one thing about São Miguel, I haven't been there myself, but I'm told that the roads are very windy. So just keep in mind if that affects you, to, you know, consider bringing whatever medication you need or the bands to kind of help you with motion sickness. So that's one thing on the island to think about. The other thing is that we do have, we need adapters. So make sure you've got your adapters. And if you're like me and have a lot of tech devices, just make sure you've got lots of cables to be able to charge your phones, your cameras, your whatever, iPads. And then on our free day, you know, some of you might choose to go hiking or walking or whatnot. So if you think you'll need it, just consider, you know, collapsible walking stick or hiking sticks. That would be helpful. So yeah, just kind of be prepared for different weather on the island for sure.
Absolutely. And the same thing really applies to Porto as well, not to the same extent. The weather in Porto is a bit more stable, but again, it's also basically on the Atlantic coast, and the temperatures can also vary even in early May. I mean, it's usually perfect traveling weather, but I would say the same thing. And you make a great point about the footwear, something to be mindful of, because you'll have Ponta Delgada in the Azores and Porto, cobblestone streets all over the place. You know, they can be slippery. So think about treads. I think that's a great point. I see a note in here that that hiking sticks has to be checked. I think that's a good point, because they tend to be pointy, pardon the pun. So thanks, Ingrid, is that you know, it's the only drawback if you're taking carry-on is that you may not be able to take the hiking sticks without checking in. So I'm not saying you have to take carry-on luggage. It's just something to consider, particularly if you're doing the Porto, if you're not doing the Azores, where there is some opportunity for walking and hiking. We'll get into that in just a second. couple other things to remember. Michelle, I know you were going to say something about specific to the Algarve in May as far as stuff to bring.
Yeah, well, first I wanted to also mention that well, the weather is a bit more stable in Algarve, but it's always good to be prepared. So if there is any windy day or rainy day, it's good to have like a light jacket, just like Valerie mentioned. Any other than that, well, the weather is moderated by the ocean, so it doesn't usually get hotter than mid-20s. But yeah, you always be surprised how hot it gets when you are under the sun. So be prepared, bring your hats, sun-cream, and anything you might need to avoid intensive sun.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's often we find, and I'm here in Sicily now with a group, and we've had sunny blue skies, and people underestimate this. It's like, oh, I didn't bring sun cream. I didn't think about it, but think about it. It's important because the sun can be really strong, and it can be warmer than you think. So it goes back to those layers, I think, that we were talking about.
Yeah, always good to be prepared.
It's always good to be prepared for whatever you need. Think about, we put a picture up here of adapters for a reason. The standard adapters in Portugal are the EU kind with the 2 round prongs here, and there's variations of that. But if you have an adapter plug with the 2 round prongs, you should be good. All this stuff is mentioned in the pre-trip information document. You don't, for most things, particularly, mobile phone chargers and camera chargers and stuff like that, you don't need a converter. But we have had some members who have mentioned that they have like, curling irons or some older appliances that are that require that only work on 110 volts on North American voltage. So if you do have something that you're not sure, check the label, because in that case, you don't want to just plug it in to a 220 volt socket because you won't like the results. So, but for the most part, most appliances and stuff, you can just get an adapter, like the adapter plug in it. You can get it even at the dollar store, and bring sufficient cables. Like having an extra iPhone cable or an Android USB-C cable or whatever cable, because it's the type of thing that you can get all this stuff there, but it's just a pain in the neck if you don't have it. And Valerie, you mentioned Ziploc bags as well. You never know when it's going to rain. I tell you, it's so handy. Just throw stuff, particularly your passport. I mean, passport you're going to leave in the safe when you get to the hotel, but they are super handy because certain things you just don't want to get wet. And so, yeah, was there anything else to remember? Yeah, I mean, don't forget your camera.
One other thing I was going to add, this is just me having talked to the host who did it last year, was that when we're in the Azores, they have the thermal springs. And he recommended that if you are packing a swimsuit and going to be enjoying them, to make sure it's a dark swimsuit, just because you're in a natural hot spring. So bring a darker colored swimsuit.
That is super duper advice. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, the color of the water, when you first see it, you're gonna be like, oh my God, it's brown. Well, it's natural hot springs. The water is very therapeutic, but it's very brown. So if you go in with a white bathing suit, it will not be white afterwards. So very, very good point. Let's move on for a second. Let's talk a minute about currency. Obviously, Portugal is the euro throughout. So here's my advice about euros. I really don't recommend running off to your local bank to pick up euros. First of all, they don't have any. Probably you have to order them. They'll give you a terrible exchange rate in Canada. I'm going to be dissing the Canadian banks for a minute. So you can get euros easily using a debit card or a credit card pretty much at any ATM in Europe. That being said, also at home, and there are exceptions, some banks in Canada have special foreign credit cards and blah, 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 no fees. Check, because if you just have an ordinary card, like I just have like a TD Visa card, I never use it for getting money out because they charge you like $7 or something to withdraw the money, and then the exchange rate is horrible. We recommend the Wise card because This is like a prepaid debit credit card. It's a Visa actually, and you can load it up by charging it up from your bank at home using Interac e-transfer. It gives you the best exchange rates. It's a multi-currency card. I think there's like 40 currencies on it or something. You can switch between Canadian dollars and euros and Swiss francs and not Argentinian pesos, all kinds of currencies fit onto this card. You monitor it on an app. It's really, really cool. We put the link in there. The members that we have that use it here think it's the best thing since sliced bread. So this is kind of the future of travel cards. And you can also withdraw up to a certain amount of cash without any fees. Now, if the bank machine that you are at in some countries charges a fee, then you obviously can't avoid that, but you're going to have that anyway. But for the most part, you can withdraw money without fees at a great exchange rate. So that's just our plug on that. It is good to have some cash. I don't think you need tons of cash on this trip. I mean, credit card machines are ubiquitous throughout Europe, so you can pretty much tap almost anywhere you go. So, but you know, if you're going out to grab a cappuccino that's €2 or something like that, then obviously having some cash on hand is handy. But as I say, I don't particularly suggest bringing it with you unless you already have some from the last trip. Let's talk about communication. So we have been using Wheel and Anchor, an app called Telegram for all of our communication with our members while on trips. And we've actually, up until recently, only used it on our live away trips. So on our longer trips that are like a month in duration. But what we found is that people, once they get used to it, love it so much that they say we should use this on all of our trips. So it's not mandatory. It is optional, but Telegram is an app that works much like WhatsApp. And so again, the information is in your pre-trip document. You can go check out, download the app on your smartphone. This begs the question is, do you bring your smartphone? I think it's a good idea. Again, you don't have to, but in this day and age, you know, particularly if you get a bit lost somewhere, wandering around the streets of Porto, which is where you're most likely to get lost if you're going to get lost, or, you know, if you know, something happens, you need to send a message, you need help from Valerie or from Michelle. This is the most convenient way to do it that also sort of protects your privacy, right? WhatsApp is very ubiquitous. That's why we don't use it. So I recommend check it out. Now, of course, that would mean that you would need to access the mobile network or Wi-Fi when you're there. And so one of our members, Ingrid, asked a question about SIM cards. So you have two options when you're roaming in Europe if you want to use your phone sort of anytime on the fly. One is you either use your home mobile provider's Roam Like Home plan that Rogers has, Bell has, they all have them in Canada. Quite frankly, and again, I'm going to be dissing our mobile phone providers in Canada. They are ridiculously expensive. You can get generally a month of coverage for what it costs you for one day at home, but some people think it's convenient, and you obviously keep your home phone number and people can reach you just like they can at home. It's like 15-16 bucks a day or something like that. Or you get a prepaid SIM card when you arrive. And so I know that both in Porto Algarve and the Azores, as well as in Porto, and I'm certain in Faro as well, they have like Vodafone kiosks at the airport. You can go there, grab a SIM card, stick it in your phone, or they'll do it for you, and then you'll have local data, calling, you'll have sort of everything you need. In this day and age, and I don't want to overcomplicate all this, you can also make use of eSIMs, which are electronic SIM cards that you can pre-purchase for use in Portugal. But as I say, that's getting really high tech. I've never actually used one myself, but now more and more people are saying, oh, that's the way to go, because you don't actually have to go anywhere to buy it. You can buy it online. So yeah, did you guys want to add anything on that about SIM cards or Telegram?
No, I think I would just add that I had never heard of Telegram 2 days ago until we were chatting, and it's really easy. It's just an app. Go on the App Store, download it. Setting up an account took 1 minute. Really seamless, and I think it'll be a really good communication tool. So I will be using it to communicate. So if you are able to download it, it's easy.
It's handy.
It's very handy. Yeah.
Yeah, what our hosts say is that, you know, we usually set up a channel, which is like a way we can broadcast messages, and we say that, you know, if you check your Telegram, before you go to bed at night, and in the morning, if there's any last minute updates, like, we have to leave a half an hour later or half an hour earlier, rather than Michelle or Val running around knocking on everybody's doors or calling you up, it's there on your phone. So we put that out there. Oh, and the question, it came up, if you download it before the trip, I would download it now. And again, the instructions on how to do that are in the pre-trip information document. There's lots of YouTube videos on how to use Telegram. But if you go in there, you can download it, and you can add Val or Michelle as a contact. And then same thing, if your flight's delayed or something like that, it's like, who do I tell? Well, I'll get to that in a second, but you can also be in touch with your host, who is the most important person to you inform if you are delayed. So moving right along, flying to arriving to Portugal. Well, as I say, you will, in this day and age, the airlines are pretty good. If there's a delay, they will let you know sometimes days in advance if they anticipate a problem with your flights, or if there's a cancellation. And so monitor your emails and double check that your flights are going on time, particularly in the 24 hours leading up to your flight, because that's usually when stuff happens. If you get notified, or if the moment you become aware that there's a problem with your flight, and I'm not saying it's delayed by 15 minutes, that's not a big deal, but if it looks like your flight is going to be delayed such that you're going to miss a connecting flight, and this doesn't apply for flying from Toronto to the Azores, but if you're coming from the West Coast or the East Coast, and you're flying first to Toronto and then going, and your flight on WestJet or whatever is delayed, so you might miss that flight. Well, that is, obviously it's important that we know that, so that we're not looking for you at the airport when you arrive. So there is in there the most important email to make a note of: delays@wheelandanchor.ca. And if you, as I say, if you do become aware of a delay that's going to have you not arrive on the flight that you're supposed to, we'll obviously know if your last flight going into the destination is delayed, but if a connecting flight is delayed. And so by emailing that, there's a few of us on the team that are notified, and we can tell the transfer company and the host, make sure that, okay, so-and-so is not going to make it. The other person would be to send a message to an email to either Michelle or Valerie, depending on, again, which leg of the trip you're on, to notify. So that's important. And then you'll fly over once you arrive. In some cases, if you're going to the Azores, Valerie's going to be on the same flight. So remember her face, look for her at the airport. Valerie, you're probably going to reach out to some members, in advance of departure, so you can maybe work out a time to meet somewhere at the airport.
Yeah, for sure. Send a note.
And for Michelle, I think most people, I don't know if anybody is going just to the Algarve. I think most are coming on one of the other sides. No, I think there's a couple of people coming directly to the Algarve. So, so in any case, let us know if there's any problem arriving. Otherwise, you will pass through customs formalities when you are, typically if you arrive in Azores, Ponta Delgada, or in Porto, they'll be there. If you're connecting through somewhere else, obviously you'll go through immigration formalities at the point of entry into the EU. And yeah, as Valerie mentioned before, just also double check the weight of your luggage, particularly if you're checking in, and even with the carry-ons. The airlines are becoming more and more strict about this stuff. And so I would, if you're going to check luggage, leave a few kilos free, because you're probably going to buy something to bring back. So good. I think that's all on that. So let's briefly touch on the itineraries. So for those of you going to the Azores, of course, you're going to fly from Toronto, or from your originating city via Toronto on SATA Airlines or Azores Airlines. It's one and the same, nonstop into Ponta Delgada. And from here, when you arrive bright and early in the morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as it were, we're going to drive you. We're going to stop for breakfast along the way. In Ponta Delgada, the airport is actually just to the west of the city, about 10 minutes away, before you make your way to Furnas and the Hotel Terra Nostra, which you're going to absolutely love. I know our members last year absolutely adored it. It's inside a volcanic crater. The hotel's claim to fame is that they have a botanic garden with a massive thermal pond. And the beauty about all this is of course that that pond, while it's open to the public during the day for admission, the hotel guests get a free use of it and after and before opening hours. So you can go early in the morning and sit in the hot thermal pool, or after a day of walking around the island. It's bliss. I'm kind of envious about that. From Furnas, you're going to go and do trips around the north and east coast, as well as all the way circumnavigating the whole island. So anyway, I'm just going to give the overview now, because I'll give some more information in a minute. Obviously, for Porto, which is in the northern part of Portugal, on the mouth of the Douro River, you're going to fly either from the Azores or from Canada, be based here for the first 5 nights, and then doing trips up to the north. And then you're going to spend the last couple of nights at the amazing Villa Gale hotel in the Douro Valley, out near Pinhao. So this is going to be a terrific experience. And finally, for those that are doing the Algarve, the first part of the trip is based in Olhau, which is like a 20-minute drive from the Faro airport. For those that are flying in from the Algarve or arriving in by rail from Porto. And this is the opportunity to really focus on the eastern part of the Algarve. And then, of course, the second half of the trip is based in Carveiro, which is a little further to the west, and you can get down to some other beautiful spots. So you're going to see so much of Portugal on this trip, particularly those who are going on all 3 segments. So as I say, the Azores, this is scenic beauty at every corner. Oh, I just thinking about something about the Azores to bring that is important because of all the scenic beauty. Motion sickness. If you are somebody that suffers from motion sickness, the roads are very windy in the Azores. Well, if you look at these pictures, you can understand it, right? In fact, like, it's so picturesque that there is like, it feels like a photo stop at every corner, and you can't stop at every corner. But if you are somebody that suffers from motion sickness, particularly in vehicles, because we're going to be traveling in like an enlarged van, a sightseeing van, do come equipped with medication or with the wristband or the patches, or there's all kinds of different things that you can do to mitigate against motion sickness. So almost forgot to mention that. So you're going to be, as I say, spending the first couple of days in Furnas, touring around this volcanic crater, walking around the Furnas Lake, and then you're going to be driving out around the island. And the vistas are kind of like this. Lake Fogo, when I was first to the Azores, I actually walked down and hiked along this lake. You won't have that time to do that here, but you will at similar crater lakes, either right in Furnas or in Sete Cidades on the west side of the island. So yeah, this is a little bit, you can expect waterfalls. I mean, scenic vistas, like the Azores has it all. And the weather isn't always sunny and blue skies like this, but it changes pretty quickly. And so you'll have a marvelous time there. And as I say, always knowing that you have those thermal baths to go back to. The second leg of the journey, obviously based in my new favorite city in Portugal. I say my new favorite city because I was always, and I'm still a huge fan of Lisbon, but when I first went to Porto, I couldn't wait to get back there again, because it's so charming and it is becoming perhaps the most sought after city destination in the country. You're going to be wandering around with my good friend and our local guide, Ricardo, or somebody from his team in Porto. Porto is actually a foodie destination, just so you know. So if you are somebody that enjoys great meals, because of course we have some meals that are included, and often, if you have a lunch on one of our tours, there isn't much room for dinner. But if you're somebody that appreciates fine restaurants, there are so many, even Michelin star restaurants, but not necessarily high-end dining, all ranges of dining. But you might want to do a little bit of Googling. And I know that, Valerie, you've spoken to Todd, who hosted this trip last year, and you got a few tips about places to go for dinner, right?
Yeah. He loves it. He has nothing but amazing things to say. So yes, I have a hot list of places and things. So
Exactly. So you can sit down with Valerie for a bit and find out the places that you need to go. Of course, you're going to go up and visit some great cities that are often not on the tourist track, at least not for North Americans, like Braga, that dates back to the 10th century, and Guimarães, which is basically the birthplace of Portugal. Both of these places are less than an hour drive outside of Porto, and give you a completely different perspective on the country, and in spring, flowers blooming, just amazing. But the highlight, even though everything's a highlight on this, is going up to Vila Gale, which is in the Douro Valley, in one of the most picturesque spots. This is not actually there, but close by. You look up over the valley at all these terraced vineyards. You're going to be at this wonderful hotel that's set amongst all that. Amazing food, overall, it's a fantastic experience being out there in the Douro Valley. A lot of people come to Portugal and do river cruises up and down the Douro River, but quite honestly, the way to do it is to be on land and stay there. Anyway, so you're among the lucky ones. And then finally, the third leg of the journey. So for those of you who are continuing from Porto down to the Algarve, you're going to be going by high-speed rail all the way down from Porto, which does, I think, may require a stop in Lisbon, but we're going to get you those details if you don't have them already. And then you're going to be joining Michelle, who's going to meet you in Olhão. So let me say, yeah, exactly. Michelle's just as excited as everybody that's coming on. So the climate is going to change quite a bit, because you're going all the way from the north of the country to the very southern coast. As we mentioned at the onset, you are on the Atlantic Ocean, which is quite cold. You can still bathe in the water. The sea may even hit 18, 19 degrees. So it may still be swimmable, but it's, for those who like swimming in Canada in June or May or June, it's much like that. But the weather is glorious at this time of the year. And as you spend the first few days in Bilbao, which is kind of a quieter town in the Algarve. Algarve is full of cities that are quite busy and lively, and party towns like Albufeira and so on. But that's not really, we didn't feel that was the place for our members. I think Olhão is the perfect place to stay. And from here, you're going to go out and visit the natural areas like Ria Formosa, and obviously the coast that changes from all the way from the east part on the Spanish border all the way over into Cabo de São Vicente at the southwestern tip of Portugal. Beautiful towns, both inland as well as along the coast, the Algarve mountain range. So of course you've got the first nights in Olhão, and then the last part of the trip based out of Carveiro, that you'll be able to go down to like Sagres and all these places that again are at the further limits of the Algarve, that allows you to get a little bit beyond the usual tourist trail. So that's about it. We're almost at the time that we will take any questions. So if there's something festering, something that we didn't address already, please let us know. As far as leaving, again, once again, you will be informed by email by your airline, I think, if there's any changes. So keep an eye out for that. If necessary, you can ask your host for assistance to double check all your flights and all the rest of it, that we know that we get you to the airport on time, or otherwise make any changes last minute if something comes up that affects your flights. But otherwise, something that was mentioned to me that I was not even aware of, although the ArriveCan app is no longer a requirement to enter Canada as it was during the pandemic, it is still a handy tool, because you can skip having to stand at one of those machines punching in all your data. If you've completed the ArriveCan app correctly, you can sort of bypass those machines and go straight to the immigration officer, who will see that you filled all that in already. So is that your experience as well, Valerie? Yeah. So there you go. So I haven't actually tried that because I haven't been to Canada in about 8 months. So so I think that's great. So yeah, this is the time for any questions. Of course, if you don't get your questions answered today or something comes up after this webinar, please do let us know. Barb, have we got any questions from members?
Yeah, we have a couple. So if people think of anything else, they can put it in the Q&A box or even in the chat box. We do have a question asking if hotels will have laundry facilities.
Well, hotels, all the hotels in the program will have some laundry facilities. I think that you know, the hotel laundry tends to be a little bit on the expensive side. You can find, and again, to host, you know, we'll source out laundromats or less expensive laundry services that sort of do it by the kilo. That's kind of what we recommend to members. But again, if you pack sort of accordingly, you can, a lot of people find you can get away with sort of, you know, a small little bit of laundry soap and sort of doing stuff in the sink, but you definitely can get laundry services in hotels.
Okay, good. There is also a question for people when they have free time on their leisure day. I guess in each of the areas, how is public transit, like in terms of getting around on their own?
The public transit in the Azores is there. I mean, there's public transit in all of these places. In the Azores, it's a little bit limited. You're not likely to use public transit in the Azores. In Porto, for sure. In fact, in part of the Porto segment of the trip, you've got a 4-day Porto card will allow use of the public transit system. They have a subway in Porto, and it's quite easy to use. The Algarve, then, on the other hand, again, it's because everything is kind of further apart, you're not likely to use sort of any public transit type thing. We're going to keep you fairly busy, and there is enough to do in the Algarve that you're probably not going to be trotting off too far on your own. But to the extent that you want to, again, together with Michelle or Valerie, they'll try and get you pointed in the right direction.
Okay, and then we do have a member asking how many people are on the Porto tour. So it looks like there's about 14, which is similar on each of the sectors.
Yeah,
Take
on
a
each of
little
the
bit.
segments, it's around 14 people. I know we had a few people that just signed up quite recently. We were lucky to be able to accommodate them.
Yeah. And then at the hotels, is there shampoo, conditioner, and blow dryers?
Yes, I believe that at all the hotels, all that stuff is there. I mean, if when in doubt, you know, it's never a bad thing is get a couple of travel containers of your own, but at all the hotels that we're staying in, you should have all those things provided. And in the worst cases, they'll give you a little amenity kit at the front desk. We find some more and more hotels are going away from providing all these little extra plastic bottles just in the interest of the environment. But mostly they're still provided.
Okay, perfect. I think those are the there might be more. More have just come in. So, okay, so in the Algarve, is there stores and restaurants? Are they open all day, or like how late do they open is a good question too.
Stores, I don't know, that is a good question. So stores, grocery stores, all the rest of this kind of thing. So first of all, stuff is generally not open on Sunday anywhere in Portugal. And of course, there's always something open, but generally speaking, stores are closed other than in very touristy areas. So that's important to note, particularly if there's something you really need and it's sort of Saturday afternoon, better make sure you go out and grab it because otherwise you'll wait till Monday. And the opening times of stores, generally speaking, again, in these more tourist places, like Porto, you're probably talking about 8 o'clock in the evening. In some places, it might be 6 if it's, you know, a smaller non-department store type of a place. But yeah, they're going to be open pretty much all day. Now, I see the question is do they have a lunchtime siesta? That will vary a little bit. Again, smaller towns will tend to have that, but given the timing of each day and when you arrive back from your excursions, if it's a full day, typically sort of 3-4 in the afternoon, you'll find that stores are generally going to be open except on Sundays.
Okay, good. One other question is at the Douro Hotel, is there is it easy to get to restaurants and places like walking distance?
The restaurant at the hotel is kind of the place that we recommend to stay. You are out in the country, so off the top of my head, I'm not sure because I actually haven't been to that hotel. Do you happen to recall, Val, from your discussion with Todd about the dining close by to Douro? We didn't mention anybody said that they were starving on that trip, but we can certainly find out.
I don't have the answer to that, but yeah, we can look into that.
No, we can find out that, Brian. As I say, we don't have any feedback that anybody went hungry while they were out in the Douro. Sorry, Byron. So yeah, let's get back to you on that, and and we'll find out for you. I see one other question came in about the Porto card. Yeah, you won't get it on the very first day. You'll get it to you, I believe, on the second day in Porto, because the first day you've got an orientation tour, and sort of during that time is when our local guide will arrange that you get that. So you've got it for both your leisure days as well as the other days when you're going to want to be able to go around and do things on your own. So we'll get it to you in appropriate time.
Okay, a couple more questions. A lot of questions on Porto, it seems. So one question is the free days in Porto or on the weekend, are there things that they're able to do?
Yeah, like restaurants and so on are open. I mean, not every single retail shop will be open, but Porto, being a very touristy kind of place, is generally open. And similarly, museums and so on are open. It varies a bit because it's not like you can say everything's open or everything's closed. It's sort of a little bit all over the place. So if you're doing a bit of advanced planning, then you might want to go online. Like if you want to go to Livraria Lello, which is we recommend to visit, and a lot of people want to go there. This will be pointed out during your orientation tour. And so the local guide can sort of say, hey, by the way, if you want to visit this, tomorrow or on this day or on that, then they can sort of point you in the right direction of the timing for that. Museums and stuff will often more likely close on a Monday rather than on a Sunday, is kind of how things work. So but as I say, you're not going to be sort of caught with nothing to do. There's things going on every day of the week, even if not everything is open all the time.
Okay, good. I think we just have one more question, which is how do they get to the seaside when they're in Porto?
So if you're looking to head out to the seaside, you can take public transit, which I believe you can use with your Porto card. And so again, on the orientation tour, they can give you advice on where to go and the best way to get there. It's not terribly far. Or alternatively, as I say, if you're doing a little bit of that advanced planning research, take a look at Google Maps. That's often a way to go, or a couple of questions thrown into Google if there's something in particular that you want to see. And I'm not off the top of my head, Valerie, I don't recall that Todd said that anybody had gone out there outside of the context of the regular trip, but yeah, we'll it's a note, and I know our hosts are taking notes on these questions, so they'll make sure that they are equipped to point you in the right direction.
Okay, excellent. That is all that's really come in here. So if people have other questions, they can reach out to myself or Paula, and then that's good.
Perfect. Okay, good. Yeah, and please do let us know if you have any other questions. We're here to make sure that you have the best possible time there. Your hosts are here. Michelle, Valerie, thank you for your time today. And I know that everybody's excited to meet you, and you're excited to meet everybody, and you're going to have a marvelous time in Portugal. As I'm a bit envious. I'm not going. Okay. So take care. Have a great trip, and yeah, we'll speak again very, very soon. And thank you for joining us today. Bye bye.
Keep in touch.
Bye,
Soon.
everyone.
Bye.